that I think we're in for extremely rough times for the rest of this decade. And the fault of it is the government, the state, which people have been taught to believe is their mother, their savior, something they can rely on. But actually, the state is your enemy in almost all cases.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Silver Bullion Television, SBTV. I'm your host, Patrick Vieira, part of the outreach team of Silver Bullion here in Singapore, where we want to help you truly secure your wealth. Doug Casey joins us today. Doug is a world renowned speculator, libertarian philosopher, and best selling author. He is the founder and chairman of Casey Research and Doug Casey's International Man. Doug has also written many books, including Speculator High Ground and Surviving FedCoin: How to Survive and Profit from America's Coming Currency Change. And we're delighted to have Doug join us once again today. It's time to saddle up and silver up for Doug Casey. Doug, welcome back to SBTV. How are you doing?
Good, Patrick. Nice to be here with you. Although I'm in on the Chesapeake Bay in the U.S. I know you're in Singapore.
Yeah, nice place to be. Welcome back. Glad to have you back on again. Doug, as a speculator, you've invested in various markets over the years. What are some key principles or strategies you believe have contributed to your success in navigating these markets?
I think it's important to have an understanding of economics. Now, you can be a good trader, you can be a good investor without understanding economics, um, just by having discipline and so forth. But look, let me say something that will shock most people. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger don't understand economics. They really don't. But they're fantastic investors, among the best the world has ever seen. Uh, but in my own case, uh, I view myself more as a speculator than an investor. And if you're going to be a speculator, it's good to understand the way the world works in the way of distortions that the government causes. And government is such a major influence in the world today, gigantic influence, huge influence, that understanding Miesian economics is helpful to find distortions that you can capitalize on and bet against.
Yeah, we'll definitely touch on governments in a bit. Your book, Crisis Investing, it gained widespread attention for its insights into profiting from economic and political turmoil. Given the ever changing global landscape, what advice do you have for investors or speculators looking to capitalize on current and future crises, many of which we are seeing today?
Well, it seems to me that as great as your financial risks are today, and they're huge, uh, the biggest risks are political risks. So it's prudent to diversify financially, not have all your eggs in one basket, even if you think you're watching that basket very closely. The same thing goes in politics. To have all your eggs in just one country is a mistake. You've really got to internationalize yourself. Now, the ideal thing is to have your income in one country, your bank in another country, your residence in a third country, your passport in a fourth country. Uh, Most people can't do that, but that's an ideal to work towards.
With what you just said there, I know it seems to be getting more and more difficult, especially for, let's say, U.S. citizens as they try to open up a bank account in different countries. Are you seeing that it's actually getting a bit harder to do?
Oh, not just a bit harder. It's actually impossible unless you have at least seven figures. Uh, there's no bank, there's no brokerage anywhere in the world that wants your business if you're an American person. The reason is that uh, since the world rotates around the US dollar and the US government today, it's just not worth their time and trouble from a regulatory point of view. to take an American person on. So it's perfectly legal for an American to have a foreign bank or brokerage account, but they're going to have to work very hard to find somebody that'll take their business.
Right. And within that, do you also recommend trying to get a second passport or even change of citizenship? Through your experience, is that fairly hard to do as well? Or there are easy, not easy, but there are ways to actually get it done?
Well, it's important to have a second passport and citizenship because they usually, not always, but usually go together. Uh, but it's also getting harder. For instance, St. Kitts and Nevis was the first country to offer economic citizenships where you made a contribution or you bought enough real estate. It used to be $125,000 of a contribution or about $300,000 of real estate in St. Kitts or Nevis. Um, but they've recently raised that to 250,000, and many of the other little countries, mostly in the Caribbean, Dominica, Grenada, a couple of others, no longer have automatic entrance to the Schengen zone. So yes, it's not only harder and more expensive to get a second citizenship that way, but they're less recognized. And of course, the European Union now charges Americans a fee to get a visa to go there. Used to be you could just get on a plane and arrive. Now you have to go on the internet, pay a currently trivial fee, 7 or 8 euros, but that didn't used to be the case. So all over the world, it's getting more restrictive. It's getting harder. And of course, you've got these ridiculous vaccine passports, which are apparently in the works. And freedom of travel is tightening up, it's vanishing all over the world, which makes it more important than ever to have a second citizenship.
Okay, great points there. Doug, you're known for your libertarian views and have written exclusively on individual freedom and limited government. How do you see the role of government evolving in the 21st century, and what impact might this have on economic and personal freedoms?
Mm. Well, government is evolving in a very disturbing direction. I'd point out that 100 years ago, uh, governments were much smaller than they are now. Uh, in most of the world, the income tax didn't exist, the value added tax didn't exist, sales tax didn't exist. Uh, Most governments in those days lived mainly on excise taxes and import duties. That was true of the US government until 1913 when the income tax was put on. Uh, but now governments control 20, 30, 40, 50% of the economies of most of the countries in the world, including the US, so that they've really gotten out of control. And along with that are a huge increase in regulations, huge growth of bureaucracies, so that freedom is being chased around the world. It's a very disturbing trend. And what's going to happen over the next 10 years, the next 20 years? Generally speaking, trends in motion stay in motion, and they often accelerate towards their ends. So that I think we're in for extremely rough times for the rest of this decade at least. Uh, and the fault of it is the government, the state, which people have been taught to believe is their mother, their savior, something they can rely on. But actually, the state is your enemy in almost all cases.
If you're enjoying this interview with Doug Casey and I, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. And did you know Silver Bullion here in Singapore offers you 6 different types of accounts to fit your specific needs? We have personal accounts, joint accounts, trust accounts, joint account with the minor, business accounts, and precious metal retirement accounts. We'll help you to set up the account to best suit your needs, so go ahead and contact us today. Doug, this belief that government, it's a body of people given power by the people for the people. Does this still exist?
Listen, I'm not a great fan of Abraham Lincoln. He's been apatheized unjustly, actually. But democracy itself has been turned into a secular god. And I see democracy itself as it's not, it's not a gentle cafe clutch like when you go out with a few friends and you vote on what movie to see and you vote on what to have for dinner or where to go for dinner. That's not the way democracy works today. Today, democracy is mob rule dressed in a sports coat where 51% of the people can do anything with the other 49%. But it's not even that. That's not even accurate. Because the way it works today is you vote for somebody, and that person decides what everybody else is going to do. And these are not people that run for political office uh, and think that democracy is electing them. They're not the best and brightest people. They're people that are power mongers, power grubbers. Uh, they get into office using the vehicle of democracy in order to become personally wealthy and, more important than that, personally powerful. So I'm not a fan of democracy. I'm a huge fan of personal freedom, but that's not the same thing as democracy. They should not be conflated.
Over the years, you've been pretty critical of central banks and fiat currency systems. You've even written a book back in 2017 titled Surviving FedCoin: How to Survive and Profit from America's Coming Currency Change. Can you tell us, in your view, on what FedCoin is and how did you see this back then in 2017?
Well, it's kind of a natural evolution of currencies the way they're going. Now, my view is that a good currency, and FedCoin, central bank digital currencies, are what they're commonly known as, uh, are the natural next evolution. Not a good evolution, but look, it used to be gold was used as money. It's a financial asset that has no counterparty risk. It's money in and of itself. Then, of course, uh, when central banks were developed, then they'd issue paper, which they said was redeemable in gold at a fixed amount. Well, that went by the boards. Uh, so now we have these central bank digital currencies, FedCoin in the case of the US, and they're backed by absolutely nothing but the faith and credit of bankrupt governments. And it's worse than that because your bank account is going to be on your smartphone. And what goes in or out of your account with the central bank can be changed arbitrarily with the push of a computer button by the powers that be. This is disastrous from a personal freedom point of view. Of course, the average person that doesn't think about personal freedom much, he thinks about his widescreen TV and uh, cheap meal at McDonald's. He doesn't care about that. Uh, but it's going to result in a huge loss of freedom for the average person everywhere in the world. It's not just in the US with FedCoin. And it's going to give a lot more power to the government, which is what these people in government want.
It- Doug, I'm out here in Singapore, and I lived in a few other countries, and I can honestly say that freedom is defined differently in different parts of the world. Some people look at freedom as liberty and justice and these types of things, and other people they look at freedom as economic freedom. But with what we're seeing today, with what central banks and governments are doing, do you think both freedoms are going to start to be getting limited somewhat?
Yes, economic freedom, that's definitely going by the boards. You need permission to transfer money from one country to another, permission to open a business, permission to do everything economically, and social freedom as well. People that get into government like to control other people. Uh, Therefore, what you can do with your own life and your own time, apart from money and finances, is also being restricted. These people are, in effect, neo-Puritans. Uh, well, they're very politically correct. They have a bizarre and destructive set of beliefs that you're supposed to adhere to. So uh, you've got to learn in today's world to do as you're told and keep your mouth shut. I'm opposed to that, and I don't do it. This is one of the advantages of having put together some money, and uh, you're able, money helps to insulate you from the stupidity in the world. And as Einstein said, after hydrogen, stupidity is the most common thing in the universe.
Yeah, amen, amen to that. But Doug, in line with Fed coin, it seems that all major central banks or governments they are going through these types of digital currency systems. And the question I have is why and why now? I mean, you've seen where currencies were backed by gold, by silver. You've seen where the backing went away, and now you're watching this fiat systems transition over into digital currency systems. So I mean, from what you see, why is it happening now at this point in time?
It's simply a trend in motion that's accelerating, as most trends in motion do. Um, it's being aided by the fact that most of the governments in the world are bankrupt, and it's the prime directive of all living things, whether it's an amoeba or a person or a corporation or a government, to survive. And the way that these governments can survive is by sucking in income from the people that they control. And this is a very, very powerful way for them to suck in more income for themselves and to exert control. So it's happening both because the kind of people that get into government always want more power, but with governments being bankrupt, they need more income. And these central bank digital currencies provide that for them. I mean, look, the US government has disclosed debt, and there's much, much more in the form of contingent liabilities. Uh, the disclosed debt is what is it, 32, 33, 34 trillion? It's academic what the exact number is. That money is never, ever going to be repaid. In fact, the interest on that is paid to holders of debt has recently crossed the $1 trillion per year mark. So that game is coming to an end. It's going to get very serious.
Right, absolutely agree with that. Yeah, Doug, how do you see precious metals fitting into this era of central bank digital currencies?
Well, I've been a gold bug all of my adult life, and I started buying gold in 1971, 1972, when gold was officially $42 per ounce or thereabouts. Um, and I've always used it as a savings vehicle, uh, sometimes as a speculative vehicle. And it's been very good as a speculative vehicle from time to time, but always as a savings vehicle, so that if I produce more than I consume, which everybody should try to do, you want to put the difference aside, your savings, in something where it's not going to be destroyed. I mean, this is the problem with countries like from Zimbabwe to Argentina. If somebody tries to get ahead in the world and produce more than they consume and save the difference, in those countries, what are you going to do? Save the Argentine peso? That's insane. I mean, it will impoverish you. That's why the countries themselves have gone down into the toilet. I speak as somebody that lives in Argentina. a good part of the year. Um, so I've always used gold as a savings vehicle and never had to dip into my savings. I've accumulated quite a bit of it, and I'm very comfortable holding it. Uh, that's what everybody should be doing. You shouldn't be saving a national fiat currency, which uh, is an IOU nothing on the part of a usually bankrupt government. Uh, if you do that, you're going to get what you deserve. I mean, people that saved in Russian rubles lost it all after the revolution. People that saved in German marks lost it all in the 1940s. Uh, I'm not interested in being caught in that trap.
We're hearing more and more how technology and sustainable green energy looks to be including more and more silver. Yet we also hear how the demand for silver is going to outpace the supply of silver. So, from your vantage point, how do you see the demand for silver keeping up with the supply of silver?
Well, rough numbers. Uh, there's about 1 billion ounces of silver mined every year. And most silver is a byproduct of other metals, mainly copper, but also gold and lead and zinc mining. So it's a byproduct primarily. It must be 90% is a byproduct. So even if the price of silver goes to $100 or $200 an ounce, which is possible, it's going to be very hard to increase the supply because if you've got a huge copper mine and silver is a small credit, it's nice if it goes up, but you're not going to change anything because of that. So uh, I think there's good reason to be bullish on silver. It's both a monetary metal, uh, although gold is the real monetary metal, and it's an industrial metal as the most reflective and conductive uh, of all metals. Uh, it's chemically unique, so it's a high-tech metal. And with this current hysteria that's going on to go green and generate electricity through windmills and solar collectors, I think it's really stupid. You can't run an industrial society with basically kids' toys. Uh, but that's a whole different subject. Nonetheless, that's the way things are going. So that for solar collectors, there's going to be a lot more silver used because it's the most reflective element in existence. So, yeah, I think silver demand is going up, and I'm a bull on silver. It's a much smaller market than gold. It's much more volatile than gold, and I'm not going to come up with a dollar number of what silver should be trading at, but under the right circumstances, it could easily exceed its old highs and go far beyond them. $100 silver, it's quite possible. I own a lot of silver too.
From again, from your vantage point in the resource sector with what you see going on there, is it? Do you see the possibility of more mines being able to open up to explore for more silver, maybe for more gold, or is it getting a bit more difficult with governmental restrictions and the green movement going on?
It's extremely difficult to look. Mining is a terrible, terrible business. It's been very good to me, but that's not to say it's not a terrible business. Uh, just the permits to open it. Look, first of all, it's no longer really a question of having a pickaxe and a mule and going out and finding an outcrop. Uh, those are all gone. It's a high-tech thing to find a mineral deposit, and it's expensive to do that. So after you've spent hundreds of thousands or many millions to find a deposit, then you've got to spend tens of millions more to prove it up. And then after you think you've got an economic deposit, whether it's of silver, gold, or any other mineral, Then you have to wait 10 years, typically, to get the approvals from governments that you need to go into production. And then after you're in production, you're going to be taxed. You're going to have to pay royalties. You're going to have to pay off the natives. You're going to suffer the slings and arrows of NGOs that think you're a bad guy. Uh, no, it's a horrible business. And I say that as somebody that still speculates in mining stocks, which are very, very cheap right now for just the reasons that I brought up.
Let me switch back over to your philosophies, your beliefs, and it's because many people admire your ability to think independently and challenge conventional wisdom in the era of narratives. What advice do you have for individuals who want to develop their own critical thinking skills and avoid herd mentality in their decision making?
Ask questions. Well, first of all, don't automatically believe anything that you hear, no matter who says it. But when somebody says something, especially if they're on mass media, question that uh, and try to figure out why they're saying it and keep asking questions. Don't believe anything automatically and keep asking questions. That leads to critical thinking. And critical thinking should keep you out of trouble. It'll certainly keep you out of political rallies. People that go to political rallies and wave flags and all that for, some power grubber that wants to be president or whatever he wants to be. Uh, I automatically designate them as being fools.
Doug, the concept of anarcho capitalism is often associated with your philosophy. Can you explain this concept and address some of the common, let's say, misconceptions or criticism that it faces?
Well, I'm what's known as an ANCAP, an anarcho capitalist. In other words, I believe in personal freedom, free markets, a maximum of freedom for everybody, everywhere. Um, where the main, well, there are only two rules that you have to remember. My friend Rick Mayberry has crystallized better than anybody else. It's one, do all that you say you're going to do, and two, don't impinge on other people or their properties. Uh, and that's really all you need to know. And frankly, any kindergartner uh, intuitively understands those things, but that should be the whole of the law. Uh, but the problem, as I said earlier, is government itself. Government is a formalized instrument of coercion. Uh, it's not about voluntary anything. It's about if you don't do it, they'll hold a gun to your head. And most of the laws that government passes today have nothing to do with those two laws that I just enumerated. It has to do with laws that the government arbitrarily passes, which are generally passed either for their benefit or the benefit of people that they like, usually that have paid them off directly or indirectly. So, as an anarcho capitalist, I think that the ideal is to have a free society that's self governing, much the way a restaurant is free and self governing. If you're on the restaurateur's property, you have an agreement, an implicit contract, and it's peaceful and gemütlich. Uh, Society should be more like that. And therefore, I want to reduce the amount of government. Uh, Perhaps we can start out with cutting it 50%, and then cut it another 50%, and then cut it another 50%, and see how close to zero we can get. Because it's not a good thing. Coercion is never a good thing. And when you institutionalize coercion, you're asking for trouble.
How much of a role would sound money play in this?
Oh, it's critical because if people are going to relate to each other, trade with each other, build their personal wealth, you need a numeraire. You need sound money. And from my point of view, that means either a commodity money or a new money that's arisen on the scene, which I have high hopes for. and that's Bitcoin, not the other cryptocurrencies, but Bitcoin. But your foundation should be in gold and silver, mainly in gold, but also in silver. It's bulkier, hard to maintain large quantities of it, store it. But gold, silver, Bitcoin, those are the sound monies today.
Doug Casey, before we wrap up, can you let the viewers know how they can follow you and explore the services you provide, and if there are any updates you can share on your book writing?
Well, I have a podcast called Doug Casey's Take on YouTube. It's easy to access just with those words. Uh, I have a blog, a daily blog, called internationalman.com, which is available just by punching in internationalman.com. I've written a number of books, but the most recent and the ones I like the best are my novel series featuring the hero Charles Knight and his evolution through the world, starting out with the Bush War in Africa. And, they're actually excellent books. Speculator, drug lord, and assassin. He reforms unjustly besmirched occupations that get more radical. There's four more books in the series, but read these first three so you don't get too far behind. They're available from Amazon and so forth.
Right, right. They're a good buy for those of you who have Amazon Kindle for sure. Doug Casey, I'd like to thank you for your time. I hope we can do this again soon. I mean, your insights, your vision of what you see ahead, building upon what you've seen from the past. I mean, I think it's truly visionary, and I do hope that more people can come on and see the same things that you're seeing.
I appreciate that, Patrick. Thank you very much.
That was Doug Casey sharing his views on the economy and gold and silver. To see more of Doug's views, please visit www.caseyresearch.com and internationalman.com. If you like this video, please subscribe, share it with friends, and give us a thumbs up. All are greatly appreciated. Audio-only versions of this interview can be found on iTunes and Spotify.